Possibilities. They're everywhere. From each atom of every molecule to thousands of kilometers deep within the earth. From the sparkling eyes of a young knowledge seeker to the silent confidence of a budding entrepreneur. Possibilities ignite the aspirations of 1 billion people. They hold the key to the future of India. Bringing them to life is what drives us as a company. We are constantly expanding and harnessing energy for diversified growth. From the largest network of natural gas pipelines in India, and also the first company to lay LPG pipelines in the country, with gas-based processing facilities for value-added products from natural gas. Spearheading new strategies in sourcing and LNG shipping. At GAIL, we are leading India's efforts to deliver clean energy to its people through new and innovative solutions. Overcoming difficult terrains and inclement weather to augment the nation's pipeline infrastructure. We are connecting clean energy sources to energy markets and enhancing lives everywhere. Thus adding momentum to India's growth story. Diversifying our global presence across varied geographical and price indexations. We are quietly striving for India's energy security. With absolute transparency, impeccable corporate practices, utmost integrity, and sustainability in all our operations, we are finding reliable, sustainable options that make a positive difference. The future holds many challenges. Challenges fraught with the possibilities of innovation and of growth. Above all, the possibility of a better life, energizing 1 billion dreams. We are committed to creating stories of progress, of enhancing India's quality of life. That's what inspires our every move. That's why we exist. GAIL, energizing possibilities.
So welcome you back to the inaugural session of the 14th edition of the Environment and Energy Conclave. So at the chamber we have Mr. Dev Mukherjee, President of the Bengal Chamber, Mr. Gautam Ray, Vice President and Chairperson of the Energy and Environment Committee, Bengal Chamber, Ms. Sophie Ross, Acting British Deputy High Commissioner in Kolkata and Deputy Head of Political and Bilateral Affairs, British High Commission, India. We are having dignitaries online as well. Ms. Melinda Pavik, Consul General, U.S. Consulate, Kolkata, Dr. Ajay Mathur, Director General, International Solar Alliance, ISA, Mr. Saurav Kumar, Executive Vice Chairperson, Energy Efficiency Services Limited, EESL, and we'll be also having Dr. Sunita Narayan, Director General, Center for Science and Environment, and Director, Society for Environmental Communications, and publisher Down to Earth. We also have Ambassador Manjeev Singh Puri, Honorary Fellow of TERI and former Indian Ambassador to the EU, here with us in the chamber. So I would request the dignitaries to please take their seats on the dais. Mr. Gautam Ray, Mr. Dev Mukherjee, Ms. Sophie Ross, and Ambassador Manjeev Singh Puri. And with this, I would request Mr. Gautam Ray, Vice President and Chairperson of the Energy and Environment Committee of the Bengal Chamber, to please deliver his opening remarks. Mr. Ray, please.
I think we need to take this off, isn't it?
I think if we're seated, is it permissible? It's very hard to know what the protocols are these days.
It's difficult.
Good evening. Welcome to the 14th edition of Energy and Environment Conclave of Bengal Chamber of Commerce and Industry. This is one of the signature events of the Chamber. And BCCI, with all its endeavor in various sectors for the industrial development and the development as a whole, but sustained effort on building sustainability is one of the key agenda for the Chamber. This is a session for brainstorming, an event for brainstorming and thought-provoking interactions. We have seen in the past, and also predominantly in the recent past, that various small and distributed initiatives in regard to the sustainability efforts, civic societies, NGOs, government of course, pressure groups, and recently the corporates also, on their boardroom agenda, this has become a very priority subject. But simultaneously, we also feel that with the endeavor of micro to macro, if we do not have something macro to micro again, the synergy will not develop. So there is a necessity of policy integration, both at global and national level, prioritization, focusing on strategy, awareness, building awareness and capacity building. These are the focal themes on which this event will deliberate on. Now, unless we bring synergy with the economic development, rightly said in the last session, nothing tangible will come into the surface. There are issues of risk mitigation. We have seen in the recent past the adverse effect of natural calamity. Even this city of Calcutta witnessed two major super cyclones. And how to really mitigate and combat those calamities. This is on the one hand. On the other hand, the issues of market penetration. Market, as we know today, is driven by the customers. The customer expectation is changing very fast. So today it is not black and white. Today it is not 0 and 1. There is a fuzzy logic in all omnipresence. And we have to find out the transition within that framework. So definitely the other areas are bringing efficiency. This has also been discussed. And optimization of resource. The whole lot of investment what we have done. For example, in the fossil fuel, should we just throw it away? Or how to really phase it out and accommodate the transition? That's the challenge. Because in the customer mindset also today, we need options and the choice to have an optimized solution among the options. We have been talking about the e-vehicle. Is it purely e-vehicle? Is it purely fossil-driven vehicle? Or is it the hybrid vehicle we will be speaking of? Particularly in the transition period I am speaking. So, this flexibility, today all the fossil fuel plants are advised how to really accommodate the green energy and how to really, earlier it was, green energy was taking the stop gaps. But today, the fossil fuel plants are also asked to really make the music as a symphony to the way we are going to the greener one. So, the event will discuss on net zero. This concept, this has also been discussed, that today, apparently which was appeared to be contradictory, today it has to be collaborative. It is not a conflicting situation between the development and the greening of the planet. Rather, it is a collaborative effort we have to take. So this transition management, shifting economy to the green economy, and we are probably passing through an era of qualitative changes. Time will come, like the latent heat converts water into steam, the qualitative change will come into place. We are all waiting for that decarbonized economy. We are all eagerly waiting to listen to COP26. Only a month away, few months away. Investment definitely will be required. There have been proposals of many funds, bonds, specifically for the green initiatives. Large-scale investment has taken place in last few years. Only before I would invite the speakers one after another to speak on the subject in the inaugural session, only word of, I would not say caution, I would say that while there is a target to achieve something 2030, 2050, but we should not encourage that. There are countries which probably is saying this, that peak is yet to come, then we will decline. So that's very important. We have today with us Ambassador Manjeet Singh Puri, who has taken the pain for flying all the way from Delhi. Our great and deep regards to you, sir. And he had made a sustained effort in the global platform on the question of sustainability. We have with us Dr. Ajay Mathur, the Director General, International Solar Alliance. I can be allowed to say him as a friend, philosopher and guide for the chamber. And he has become an institution, not only in our country, worldwide. We have with us Mrs. Sophia Ross, Acting British Deputy High Commissioner, Kolkata, and Deputy Head of Political and Bilateral Affairs, British High Commission, India. British High Commission has always been with Bengal Chamber, working very closely on the issues of sustainability. We are also grateful to have Mrs. Melinda Pavek, Consul General, US Consulate, Kolkata. Thank you, ma'am. Mr. Saurabh Kumar, he has also accepted our invitation to address this session. Executive Vice Chairperson, Energy Efficiency Services Limited. And finally, the lady who has dedicated his life for this cause, for the last 4 decades, relentless service to the nation, Dr. Sunita Narayan. She has also been kind enough to be present. So thank you, ma'am. With this august gathering and host of dignitaries, we will initiate this session with Mr. Debe Mukherjee, who is the ambassador for Bengal Chamber on the cause of sustainability. So we are grateful to him for bringing the vision that this is probably the subject on which, if we can work, if any platform or any chamber of commerce can work, they will be doing their duty for the next generation. So with this, I request Mr. Debe Mukherjee to give his welcome address.
Thank you very much, Gautam, for your very, very kind words. I'm not worthy of what you said about my being the ambassador on the subject of sustainability. Certainly, I'm trying to play my part in the chamber. And yes, sustainability is something which we all deeply care about. And in the current context, especially the current time context, the importance of sustainability has been realized and understood, I think, by all of us. I join our Vice President, Mr. Gautam Ray, in welcoming all of you to this 14th edition of Bengal Chamber's annual Environment and Energy Conclave. And this year, the theme, as you all know, is very pertinent, very focused, very relevant in terms of time, context, and importance. Journey towards net zero. And that becomes even more relevant because we are, as the theme further elaborates, at the threshold of COP26. And we are all deeply honored to have Ms. Sophie Ross, the Deputy Head of Political and Bilateral Affairs, British High Commission, India, and currently also the Deputy High Commissioner in Kolkata. Deeply grateful to you, Madam, for your presence, physical presence in person with us this afternoon. A very warm welcome to Ambassador Manjeev Puri, my friend from college. Manjeev has been so kind to come down in person, as our Vice President mentioned. We are deeply grateful to him. And we had a very interesting session just before this, this session. I won't like to call it an inaugural session, but yes, the session before this session. And certain policy level issues were discussed. The global perspective was understood in sustainability, resilience, adaptation, the focus areas of COP26. A very warm welcome, of course, as our Vice President rightly mentioned, our friend, philosopher, guide, mentor, You name it, he has been with the chamber for many years and has played a pivotal role in guiding certainly the energy and environment initiatives and all other aspects of sustainability and business resilience. Dr. Ajay Mathur, and we were very fortunate again to have him in person here in the chamber just a couple of weeks ago, and we heard from him the ISA vision on the one world, one grid, one sun, that concept. And I think we were all enriched by his talk. A warm welcome to Her Excellency Melinda Pavic. Melinda, we have not met in person. I knew your predecessor quite well. Let's hope we'll meet in person sometime very soon. And thank you very much for partnering with the Chamber in the cause of sustainability and also sharing your time with us this afternoon. Also, a warm welcome to Mr. Saurav Kumar, who has also been a friend of the Chamber and an advisor, and interestingly took the initiative of starting a very interesting and possibly the first of its kind in a heritage building in the country to put in energy efficient measures in the building to gradually bring in a green and sustainable operating environment in the chamber in this heritage building. Thank you very much, Sauravji, for having, we would have loved if you had come in person, but I take it you will join us virtually. And of course, we are so grateful to you, Dr. Sunitha Narayan, for and a very warm welcome. We are deeply honored to have you with us, again, virtually online. But we have seen you in our Energy and Environment Conclave in earlier years, and we would love to have you in person again sometime very soon. Having said that, I think in terms of the time context, the theme of this year's, the 14th Conclave, has been very, very appropriately positioned. A lot will, we have already mentioned at the policy level, the initiatives that's been taken up. We will talk a lot over the next 2 days in terms of what this journey would mean towards net zero and what the context would be on COP26, for COP26. But allow me to just make a few observations and give a few pointers in terms of where we, as a responsible and responsive Chamber of Commerce, could place ourselves in this whole piece. You see, today, if memory serves me right, I think it was in 2019, there was this campaign, the call for Race to Net Zero. Well, it was called Race to Zero campaign, if I remember right. And I think it is time for us at the Chamber and as a responsible business community to join that campaign. The question is whether the transformation or this journey towards net zero, carbon neutrality / net zero, would be a calibrated approach or a radical approach. And I think that's something that we need to debate, but certainly a radical approach would possibly be a preferred option. I do not know how that can happen, but certainly, as I said, as a responsible chamber, in our own way, we have to start working towards that, and at a speed that is absolutely imperative and necessary at this point in time. Look at the world, look at the situation around, look at where we are. The second point I wanted to mention is how we should see business As we had said at the beginning of the chamber year, towards the end of 2020, how do we see the business of tomorrow? Because we were right in the thick of COVID, we are still in COVID, but we are gradually coming out of it. Now, in this context, given this current situation and the environment, the question that I think we should all, as a business community, we should ask ourselves is whether we should reimagine the why and how we do business, the purpose of what we are doing and how we are doing it. The question to us is whether we need to rewrite the rules of business, whether we need to build sustainability and sustainable practices which should not be looked in a restrictive sense, but in a holistic, integrated sense, localizing all aspects of SDGs, all 17 aspects of SDGs, and that is what will bring about a meaningful green transformation and help in building a resilient business that will be sustainable. And that is the broader definition of sustainability from a business point of view we should look at. And that is something which we should demonstrate through cooperation and collaboration, business to business, business to the civil community, to the communities at large, and also putting forth demonstrable activities on the ground, which provides empirical evidence for policymakers to come forward and adopt the right policies, or at least come out with the right policies. As I have said earlier, it is dovetailing policy push, but market pull. So that market pull will only come if we as a responsible business community make the change on the ground. On that optimistic note, I would look forward to next 2 days of really productive discussions in charting out a doable, actionable plan and make the journey a race rather than a calibrated journey towards net zero. And I know even the International Energy Agency has said that you need a wholesale makeover of the energy system if you want the green transformation. So whether it is on the power side, whether it is on the transport, clean transport side, whether it is use of nature-based solutions, and above all, adaptation and resilience, and most importantly, green finance, all these 5 aspects which would be discussed at COP26, we from the Chamber and as a larger business community would like to play our part in it and make our own contribution. I wish this conclave every success and look forward to very productive discussions over the next 2 days. Thank you very much and enjoy the proceedings.
Thank you, Mr. Debe Mukherjee, our President. And you have rightly said, the debate is not whether the journey has started or not. It has already started. Debate is what will be the speed, whether it is calibrated or a radical approach. And business also need to decide on the approach, on the roadmap through which it will be led in future to come. From the Chamber, we have captured some of the thoughts, collated in the form of a video, and I would request the Secretariat to play the video. Thank you. We all know that in November this year, the COP26 will be held in Glasgow, UK. We are all eagerly waiting to listen Mrs. Sophia Ross, the acting British Deputy High Commissioner, Kolkata, on the subject, where we are and what would be our responsibility in this particular area. Mrs. Ross.
Thank you so much, and good afternoon to you all. And let me start with my warm greetings to Dr. Sunita Narayan, Director General of the Centre for Science and Environment, Dr. AJ Mathur, Director General of the International Solar Alliance, Ambassador Majiv Singh Puri, Honorary Distinguished Fellow at TERI, Ms. Melinda Pavek, Consul General at the US Consulate, Kolkata, Mr. Deb Mukherjee, President of the Bengal Chamber of Commerce and Industry and Managing Director at Synergist Energy Private Limited, and Mr. Gautam Ray, Chairperson of the Energy and Environment Committee and VP of the Bengal Chamber and Executive Director of CESC Limited, and finally Mr. Saurabh Kumar, Executive Vice Chairperson at EESL, and all the speakers and participants of this brilliant conclave and friends from the media. It's really encouraging and I think heartwarming to see that despite the challenges of COVID, we've gathered here today to address yet another huge threat to our existence that is posed by climate change. During my 2 years in India, I've had the privilege to visit the diverse and breathtaking landscape of India, from wildlife sanctuaries in Karnataka, the Himalayas in Himachal Pradesh, the backwaters in Kerala, and I've been struck by both India's natural beauty and the climate's vulnerability. As I stand here before you in Kolkata, I'm aware how this beautiful, vibrant megacity is itself impacted upon by the changing climates, how much the city, its adjoining areas, and the Sundarbans have suffered during Cyclone Amphan last year, right in the middle of the pandemic. And this cyclone wasn't the only one to have affected this climate's vulnerable states. Looking ahead, scientists have predicted that such disasters are only going to intensify with unabated climate change. And countries across the world, while grappling with the pandemic, suffered from floods like Germany, Belgium, and the Netherlands, Germany's worst natural disaster in 50 years. We ourselves had flash floods in the UK, there were unusual heat waves in Canada and in the US, wildfires in Turkey, France, and Greece. The Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, comprising 195 member countries, as I'm sure many of you know, recently released the most comprehensive assessment to date of the physical science of climate change. Published just recently on the 9th of August, this report paints a stark picture of the state of the climate and the perils the world is likely to face should we fail to take strong action now. It also, I think, importantly tells us that 1.5 degrees is still within reach, but only and only with strong, immediate action. Today I'm here to set the context for COP26. You will all be aware that the UK, together with our partner Italy, will convene the world in Glasgow in November for 12 days of climate talks at the UN COP26 summit. It will be the moment that every country and every part of society, we hope, will embrace their responsibility to protect our planet. And that is why in the run-up to COP26, the UK is working with every nation to reach consensus on the steps we can take to tackle climate change. This centres on calling for all countries to make a consistent and concerted effort in 4 areas. To limit global warming to 1.5 degrees, to enable communities and natural habitats to adapt to the impacts of climate change, to mobilise climate finance, and to work together to deliver action. Globally, we must find ways to transition away from coal, to curtail deforestation, to speed up the switch to electric vehicles, and to encourage investment in renewables. To meet the Paris goals, we need to take urgent action to halve global emissions in the next decades, to restore our relationship with nature, and to reach net zero by 2050. With only 2 months to go till COP26, the message is clear. We must act now to tackle climate change before it's too late. But amid crisis, there is always opportunity. Climate action for us is not a narrative of cost. It's one of sustainable economic growth. We need to transform the world's economies towards new low-emission pathways, and India is well positioned to play a leading role in this process globally. By making the right choices now, India can chart a more prosperous path towards a low-emission future, benefiting its own citizens and safeguarding its own future growth against climate risks. Moreover, it can seize the opportunity to export key technologies and experts that could accelerate progress in the rest of the world. The road to a prosperous future will mean we'll have cleaner air, our relationship with nature will be restored, and we will protect the world from the dangerous climate change, all while creating from the dangers of climate change, all while creating jobs and boosting the economy with green investments. In the UK, our economy has grown by 75% and emissions reduced by 44% over the last 30 years. This shows we do not have to choose between cleaning up our environments and growing our economy. The UK has recently released its decarbonising road transport plan that builds towards the commitment to transition to 100% new car and van sales being zero emission by 2035. Despite the pandemic, new policies and technology partnerships are being established. And I hope that you'll all be able to hear more about these in the UK session on COP26 and clean transition tomorrow. We are so glad to see the great work by India in the clean transition space. India's domestic progress on clean energy transition has been outstanding. More than 100 GW of renewable energy installed. And I'd like to congratulate India for achieving the emission reduction of 28% over 2005 levels against the target of 35% by 2030, committed in its nationally determined contributions. And it's great to see Indian states and cities adopting ambitious policies on electric mobility. India has shown impressive leadership on climate and clean energy even during lockdown, with commitment to achieve 450 GW new solar and wind by 2030, and on the global stage by launching the International Solar Alliance and the Coalition for Disaster Resilient Infrastructure. The UK is proud to be a partner in both to help stimulate a clean and resilient recovery from COVID-19 and to improve lives, livelihoods, and economies. This is a long-term partnership. We've been working together with India on developing secure and sustainable sources of energy for more than 35 years. As many of you know, the COP26 President Alok Sharma was in Delhi last week, and he had very good discussions with the Indian government and important partners like Dr. Mathur and some of India's biggest companies. It's inspiring to see businesses grasping this opportunity opened up by the low-carbon economy and committing to a net zero pathway through the UN's Race to Zero initiative, which is a great signal of corporate leadership. And I'm pleased that nearly 30 major Indian headquartered companies have already made that bold commitment and have joined the Race to Zero, including Dr. Reddy's Laboratories Limited, Mahindra Group, Renew Power, and Dalmia Cement. Many others are committing to bold action to use more renewables and to improve efficiency and switch to electric vehicles. Now is the time for more Indian companies to join these movements and show leadership, just like Zomato, who recently committed to completely transitioning to electric vehicles by 2030. To contribute to a sustainable and green recovery, the world is looking once again to industry to lead the way. The UK has always shared great partnership with West Bengal and its businesses when it comes to climate action. Clean energy, clean transport transition, and building adaptation and resilience. We've worked closely with the Kolkata Municipal Corporation with a multi-sectoral programme to develop a roadmap for a low-carbon and climate-resilient Kolkata. We're glad that Kolkata has built on this to emerge as one of the top cities in India, showcasing leadership on climate action. And we're collaborating with the West Bengal government on the Living Deltas Hub project, a multidisciplinary project to address climate vulnerability in the Sundarbans. And with the West Bengal government on knowledge exchange on electric mobility. The city is now internationally recognised as one of the leading cities in the world on the uptake of electric buses and public transportation system. And through this partnership, we're confident that West Bengal will do even more. Journey towards net zero at the threshold of COP26 is the theme for this 14th Environment and Energy Conclave. This needs concerted and collaborative efforts. This needs individual and collective action. And this needs partnerships at all levels to work on shared priorities and common challenges. Because embracing a greener future is the only way forward for a more prosperous and a healthier world. I'd like to extend my thanks to the Bengal Chamber for putting this brilliant event together and wish you all the best for the rest of this conclave. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Ross. You started with the diversity of India, mentioned about the threats of the natural calamity all across the world, including the Amphan, what hit the city very badly. One very important aspect you have mentioned, that we must act before it is too late. Probably that is very, very contextual in today's perspective. Definitely India has a very, very ambitious plan, not only setting up the renewable. India operates one of the largest, fourth largest power grid in the country, in the world. So there are high hope on India, as well as you have also mentioned about the promising and very aggressive plan and program for the state of West Bengal. Now from India, we also need to listen about the global perspective, and for which nobody better than Ambassador Manjeet Singh Puri can deliver it. We are very fortunate, we are grateful to have him with us. So, Mr. Puri, please.
Mr. Ray, thank you very much for this wonderful introduction. I am not at all sure that there isn't anyone far better qualified than me. But I want to thank the Bengal Chamber. I want to thank the President in particular, my friend from college, and an activist on environmental and sustainability issues whom I have known for a long time. I want to thank you all for being here. I also want to recognize that there is something very interesting in the way coincidence has brought the greatest players together in having both the United Kingdom and the United States in our midst here. Of course, the UK as the hosts of COP26 have a special role, but without doubt, the pull and the engine that the United States provides, we would not be able to make truly meaningful progress in the area of sustainability, in particular, both with finances, technology, and of course, in terms of global emissions. I think we should be very clear. I'm delighted to see two of my great friends, Dr. Sunita Narayan and of course, Dr. Ajay Mathur there. Mr. President, it's fantastic that you're asking Ajay to deliver the keynote address. someone who I believe is one of the leading members of the Indian community engaged with sustainability and the environment. And every single one of us is benefited by his knowledge, his expertise, and above all, his passion and involvement. The ISA will certainly go places. And Sunita, I'm very thrilled and delighted to see you, although on the screen, a great activist. We all know what she has done in so many ways. But you know, today the buzzword in India is climate justice. And I hope I can remind everyone, with your permission, Sunita, that this word is today used by us so much, but the idea of climate justice has much to do with the seminal work done by Sunita and her mentor, which is the one which has resulted in all of us being cognizant of the need for justice, equity, and doing the correct things as we move towards a resilient planet. What a good idea to honor her today. Mr. President, kudos to you, and great to see you there, Sunita. Friends, let me say a few things to you. I arrived in Calcutta yesterday and I saw a copy of The Statesman. The lead op-ed articles were one by the Consul General of Britain and the Consul General of Italy, talking about seize the moment, COP26, sign up to net zero. On the other side of the page, and I understand why, it was adaptation first, written by Salimul Haq from Dhaka, a leading member of the environmental community from the global south. Mr. Ray, you asked me for global perspectives. I think I've given it all in just the way this particular newspaper was structured. Let me try and say a few points to you on all of this. First of all, for the global south, and I'm speaking in very big and broad things, there should be no doubt that the question of adaptation is absolutely critical. You know, we've all been through climate change, these negotiations, the science behind it now, at least since 1988, when the first UN resolution was adopted. We know what differentiated responsibilities are. We know what common responsibilities are. We know that it's the stock that matters perhaps more than what current emissions, though the importance of current emissions cannot be understated. And when we look at this particular thing, the global south, including, madam, many of the events that you mentioned, they are the outcomes of what has already happened. During COVID, during the pandemic, global GDP has never fallen that much in our lifetimes, and so did global emissions. Yet the impact on global warming has been really minuscule, simply because the stock is already there. We need to understand this, and we need to also act in trying to understand what that means and what it has to be done. Comes the issue of climate justice. I don't think I need to spell that out a lot more, but equity and climate justice are important, no doubt. They're raised by leaders of India, they're raised by leaders of the global south. But adaptation is really the big thing for us. We really will have to find ways of tackling those elements which will come about because of what has already been done by the world, let alone what we are doing today and tomorrow. One of the subject matters at COP26 is to discuss adaptation. A global goal on adaptation? I don't know. We've been talking about it for a long time. Difficult one, because quantifying is rather difficult. Can we do something about finances? Much of the conversations all over, both in the developing world as well as in the developed world, is what about the 100 billion which was promised in Copenhagen? Well, it is my understanding that now that climate change is once again in focus in terms of the global agenda, the Western countries, the developed industrial world, is going to put its might behind to try and see that, if not the figure itself, but we come somewhere close to it. Of course, taking into account not just government grants, but multilateral money, private sector, and so on. I think that is there. But is it going to be sufficient? The answer is absolutely not. Look at the size of the Indian economy. Look at the size of where we are going. We in India tend to only look at ourselves, and rightly so. We are going to become the largest country in the world. We are the second largest country, hopefully the third largest economy in the world in about 10 years' time. But look at how other large developing countries are doing. Look at Indonesia, Nigeria. Look at many others, even outside the BRICS and G20. And when we look at all this, the amounts required are absolutely stupendous and tremendous. I'll just tell you one little thing, something that Dr. Ajay Mathur may recall from his previous avatar as the Director General of TERI. They did a study for Shell on the issue of net zero for India by 2050 and what is possible. The study was not on money. The study was on technologies and is it technologically feasible. So let me tell you, it said yes, with a lot of push and shove, something is possible. But let's say India would be at about 6 gigatons of CO2 emissions in 2050, about 1.3 would not get abated. There are no technologies. And if you wanted to do something, for example, reforestation would be of the area that is today the state of Rajasthan. And CCS, you know, we've talked about it. I used to be on a panel with my American colleagues some 15 years back. And I'm afraid I don't want to share what happened. But you know, dreaming is very good, but these technologies are not on the anvil. Neither is hydrogen. I hope that it will be. It is my considered belief, and I'm a great believer in collaboration. Similarly, on monies, I must mention this point. General conversations are, do it now. I completely agree with you. We can't wait because it is the order of the day and the requirement for the global south, global north, and everyone. We must do it today. But monies required are tremendous. They're not the small sums that usually get mentioned because, and I'll leave this thought with those of you who are mathematically inclined, these sums are discounted sums. If we don't discount them and look at real figures, the matters are completely different. I don't want to sound alarmist in any sense, but when you look at figures which are not discounted, from now to 2050, the kind of investments that would be required are of a very stupendous nature. They have the potential to having developmental impactation. Therefore, it becomes very necessary for political decision makers to take the decision. Now let me come to India, sir. I have no doubt in my mind that we will be one of the largest geographies in the world undertaking green action. This has nothing to do with the burden sharing negotiations which are taking place at the UNFCCC. India is committed. Look at our commitment, the suo motu commitment at 450 gigawatts of renewable power with a large chunk coming from solar. Look at the kind of heft and hue that we will bring in. And almost all of it is being done by ourselves. We are going to be therefore committed in a very big way in terms of great and huge, large global action. I sincerely hope that in the industrialized countries, the same in terms of domestic action will also take place. Not just in terms of the international requirements. Many people ask, and you know, I think I might as well use the word, what is this net zero? And why is it that we are shying away from sitting here in talking about net zero? You know, the idea is not just net zero. And Minister Alok Sharma was here recently. I had the privilege of being among those who met him. And at one moment in a slightly, you know, mischievous bent, I asked him, Mr. Minister, are we talking about net zero? Are we talking about net zero by 2050? Before he could answer, a professor launched into the entire question of what exactly was it. And of course, the minister was diplomatic enough in giving his answer. The issues are, and I don't think that the world would be particularly, there would be issues about net zero by 2050 as a global goal. The idea of reducing global temperature rises from 2 degrees, the Paris goal, to 1.5 degrees may seem very simple for those of us who are not involved in it. But you know what it does? It effectively limits further global carbon space available to merely 500 billion metric tons. It's just not there unless we involve something very fantastic in terms of technologies. Will we have the pull and pressure? I firmly believe that when you set hard targets, you try and push and get them. It gives a push. But remember, and the president mentioned something about the race. I like the idea, but I'm a little wary about tripping. And I think these things are also particularly important. Collaboration, to my mind, is particularly the most important thing. If we do bring about global collaboration for technological innovation, not just everybody doing the right thing. And if we move also a little bit beyond just decarbonization into issues of lifestyle, we're talking about nature-based solutions. We're talking about several of these things. If we look at these particular things, we would have assisted the idea of decarbonize electricity, use more electricity. Honorable Prime Minister Narendra Modi from the ramparts of the Red Fort announced a national hydrogen mission in global goal. Let's try and replace the C with the H if we can. 100% electrification by the Indian Railways. Look at the carbon footprint that would be reduced. Can we do much more in terms of sustainability? If we do as a global community, we would do everyone a signal favor. I want to sort of leave it at that, but make one or two other points. One, the specific aspect of where India is. I think we should understand and realize that even among the G20, even as we talk in terms of being one of the largest countries in the world in aggregate, we are a country with some of the largest development imperatives that any country has got. Our carbon footprint remains below 2 tons per person, which is among the lowest even among developing countries in the world. And this is something that needs to be understood even by the international community in terms of the negotiations and possible outcomes. Quite apart from the fact that we are one of the very few, even among the G20, which is on line of achieving its stated goals in Paris, our suo motu commitments in terms of renewable energy, in terms of electric vehicles, and so many other things that we are taking on and doing all by ourselves, and our willingness to be part of the change that is necessary to bring in the world. Finally, let me leave the thought with you. There is a difference between India and China. I think that should be clearly understood now. I don't want to go into the questions of, developing countries, who sits with what, and so on and so forth. But the fact of the matter is, at 7 to 8 tons per capita emissions, they are perhaps in a league of their own, in a different league. One of the largest emitters in the world, that is a different kind of subject. But in my understanding, the per capita emissions metric is a much better one which captures it. And in that, they sit along with those countries which are large emitters. That includes the European Union, which is above 5 still. Madam, I'm not mentioning the United States, but these are the countries which are there. India, therefore, is in a different situation. When we look at all of this, we need to understand that I personally believe that India's commitment, decisions are of course that of the government, but as a citizen with an interest, India's commitment to green agenda, greening and sustainable development will be at the highest levels in the world. We will do the maximum. We see collaboration. Very happy to see the United States, UK here, and all others in this collaborative mode. We would be there. Net zero by 2050, I think that's a subject matter on how the issue of burden sharing will come about, how the questions are formulated, and what exactly does it mean in terms of global collaboration to try and reach this. Many people ask the question, so what's the problem? The problem, if you don't mind, and let me say it once again for everyone, if you say net zero by 2050 as a global goal, it's a goal which the entire world agrees to meet, but meet within the principle accepted for climate action, which is common but differentiated responsibility. The effort is not that. The effort is to, in a sense, let me say, outward differentiation. We will do, everybody should take that as a goal. If you can understand the mathematics of it, it tends to be a little different. The responsibility shifts to those who are today coming on steam. Anyway, let me stop at that. I think these facts are known to everyone, and many people will be very happy to hear Ajay Mathur talk about that sunrise area in which India truly is showing to the world what it can do and what it has already done. Thank you very much, Mr. Ray.
Thank you, Ambassador Manjeet Singh Puri. You have truly brought the global perspective. The climate justice and equity with which you started, the importance of global south. But the most important word which I never forget is the adaptation. Adaptation in a sense that what is the call of the day. You also mentioned about differentiated responsibility and collaborative responsibility, and another very important aspect of domestic responsibility and international responsibility. So, contradiction was there between the developed and developing. That will remain, but how from that contradictory framework we can bring the collaborative framework. That's possibly the call of the day. And technology will play a pivotal role. Money is something which we have to think of. Yes, India is a country which has a very ambitious plan, and we are expressed our highest degree of commitment to the cause. Thank you, Mr. Puri. And you have started with that the pull and the engine behind the entire journey, the role of US. We have with us Mrs. Melinda Pavek, the Consul General, US Consul at Kolkata. We are all eagerly waiting to listen to you. Madam.
Thank you. Namaskar. Good evening. Distinguished panelists, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. It is my pleasure to join this event virtually today. Thank you for inviting me. I arrived in Kolkata 2 weeks ago, and I already feel at home in this beautiful, warm city. The Bengal Chamber of Commerce and Industry, I have learned, has a long history of being the voice of local business in shaping economic policies that foster trade and businesses leading to economic development in this region. So your focus on encouraging businesses to adopt environmentally sustainable technologies and efforts to influence government to create policies that lead to a cleaner, greener world is truly commendable. I want to applaud President Mukherjee's call for a call to action and a race to net zero specifically. The United States is placing climate change at the center of US foreign policy, diplomacy, and national security. As you are aware, we are already edging closer to a 1.5 degrees Celsius warmer world, and the prospects for averting the worst impacts of climate change become dimmer every day that emissions rise. We cannot delay ambitious climate action any longer. Therefore, on his very first day in office as President of the United States, President Biden fulfilled his commitment to rejoin the Paris Agreement. To meet the global climate challenge head-on, the President has committed to reducing US emissions by 50 to 52% by 2030. It is a whole-of-government effort with new policies and initiatives being announced regularly. In a recent announcement on August 16th, the US Department of the Treasury announced new fossil fuel energy guidance for multilateral development banks, which aims to promote ending international financing of carbon-intensive fossil fuel-based energy while simultaneously advancing sustainable development and a green recovery. Placing climate cooperation front and center in our bilateral relationship, President Biden and Prime Minister Modi agreed to launch the US-India Climate and Clean Energy Agenda 2030 partnership. This partnership will elevate ambitious climate action as a core theme of US-India collaboration and support the achievement of India's ambitious targets, including reaching 450 gigawatts of renewable energy capacity by 2030. The partnership will increase financing and accelerate the deployment of clean energy and will proceed along two main tracks: the Climate Action and Finance Mobilization Dialogue and the Strategic Clean Energy Partnership. Working together, the United States and India will develop innovative clean technologies needed to reduce greenhouse gas emissions in industry, transportation, power, and construction today and into the future. We will also increase capacity to measure, manage, and adapt to the climate crisis-related impacts we are already seeing today. In this context, I would like to highlight a bilateral initiative already ongoing under the leadership of the United States Agency for International Development, USAID, to deploy clean energy in our region. The US-India Partnership to Advance Clean Energy Deployment 2.0 Renewable Energy, known as the acronym PACE 2.0 RE, partnered with Assam and Jharkhand to develop a state-of-the-art renewable energy procurement optimization and smart estimation software tool. This software helps electricity distribution companies forecast demand, establish resource plans, and optimize future procurement costs. Assam and Jharkhand are already using the tool and have shown they will reach their 30% renewable energy target by 2030 while reducing costs by approximately 5%. Environmentally smart and financially smart solutions are a double win. Aiming to put the world on a sustainable climate pathway, the United States has launched the Global Partnership for Climate Smart Infrastructure. To work with our partners on this initiative, the U.S. Trade and Development Agency, USTDA, has launched the Climate Technologies Exports Initiative. It is a public-private partnership to support the development of market opening standards overseas and the export of clean energy and climate-smart technologies and services. India is among 5 priority countries where this initiative will focus on connecting U.S. industry partners with key Indian stakeholders at the subnational level on training, workshops, feasibility studies, pilot projects, and technical assistance. The initiative will support projects and activities in transportation, including civil aviation, energy, and smart cities. We are eager to collaborate on a path to decarbonize emissions-intensive sectors that cross borders, such as aviation and shipping. The United States is committed to working with countries in the International Maritime Organization to adopt a goal of achieving zero emissions from shipping by 2050. We are also committed to working with other countries on a vision toward reducing aviation sector emissions in a manner consistent with the goal of net zero emissions for our economy by 2050, as well as on robust standards that integrate climate protection and safety. One great example of the type of climate solution collaboration we want to support is already being pursued in Kerala by some innovative private sector companies. Cochin-based green solutions provider Team Sustain, New York-based boat maker Elco Motor Yachts, and California-based solar power company SunPower have joined forces to successfully design and pilot a 24-seater solar hybrid electric boat. This technology can be used to convert hundreds of boats owned by the government of Kerala into an electric fleet. And that is just the beginning. 16% of fossil fuels in India are used by the fishing industry. Imagine how deploying this technology will help India achieve its climate goals. I look forward to hearing your ideas about how to bring climate-friendly transport technologies to this region. Transportation technology breakthroughs are key to conquering the climate crisis. I welcome the government of West Bengal's efforts to decarbonize the public transport system and the announcement of the state's electric vehicles policy. Positioning West Bengal as a sustainable transportation infrastructure hub is a smart way for government to play its role in encouraging the private sector to innovate. We are also following with interest the state's efforts to develop the inland waterways system as an environmentally friendly, cost-effective mode of transport that will divert traffic away from congested city roads and help improve air quality for all residents. The United States is a global leader in technology innovation and the development of solutions that can sustainably and efficiently support the state's climate ambitions. Our foreign commercial service team at the consulate stands ready to forge collaborations between U.S. companies and local government and private sector partners to ensure the success of these tangible initiatives. I am glad that 2 American companies, Climate Resilience Consulting, a Chicago-based company with expertise on climate resilience, and Power Engineers, a Boise-based engineering and environmental consulting firm, are participating in the technical sessions tomorrow. These kinds of exchanges of ideas will not only create success for our nations, but will also help to save the planet and its human inhabitants from a world that could become increasingly hostile to our survival. We need to act together with urgency and do everything it takes to protect our planet and our future in this decade and beyond. While governments provide the enabling policy framework, the private sector needs to step up to embrace climate-friendly business practices at all levels of operation and production. I have no doubt that you, The members of this historic chamber and participants in this event are the leaders, problem solvers, and decision makers who will envision and create the new technologies, processes, projects, and collaborations to help achieve our climate ambitions. I urge you to take on this challenge wholeheartedly because the future of our children and our grandchildren depend on us. Thank you very much to the Bengal Chamber of Commerce and Industry for the opportunity to speak today.
Thank you, Mrs. Melina Pavik. You have mentioned about the US government highest importance to this policy, new fossil fuel energy guideline, and highlighted the US-India partnership and the collaboration. Definitely, you have also mentioned about environmentally and financially smart solutions. These will show the path for the future to come. Thank you, ma'am. I would now request Dr. Ajay Mathur, Director General, International Solar Alliance. Just, I think, a month back he was here. I was looking to this side of the dais, that whether Dr. Mathur is physically present. Every time I find you here. So, I would request you to deliver the keynote address, sir.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And I'm sorry that I'm not there in person. It gives me great pleasure to be with all of you, albeit remotely. The International Solar Alliance is carrying out its regional consultations with ministers of member states from Africa today, which is the reason that I could not leave town today, but I could not but be absolutely sure to join you in this occasion as well. As has been mentioned, the International Solar Alliance is a treaty-based organization which has approximately 98 member countries, and this number is increasing day by day. It was initially made as a grouping of countries from the so-called solar-rich countries between the tropics of Cancer and Capricorn, so that they could fully utilize and accelerate the utilization of solar energy, which is abundantly available in their countries. But early in its life, the Solar Alliance moved to change its eligibility for membership, and today all members of the UN can be members of the Solar Alliance. As a result, we have seen fast growth in numbers in the recent past. I would like to share with you the kinds of lessons that the Alliance has had regarding financing for solar energy, and consequently, what do we do about it? In the first 3 years of its existence, the Solar Alliance worked with a wide variety of countries, particularly the least developed countries and the small island developing states, those which are most impacted by climate change but have the least amount of capacity to answer with responses to that problem. One of the things that we noticed was that despite the fact that these countries had access to huge solar resources, the solar buildup in these countries was relatively limited. Not just solar, energy buildup was relatively limited. This is because of a wide variety of reasons, not the least important of which is access to finance. Finance finds it difficult to flow into these countries where individual project sizes are very small, and the international investor community based in places other than the least developed countries and the small island developing states finds it difficult to focus and figure out the safety of their investments and the safety of the returns on these investments. It was with this in mind that the Solar Alliance started looking at the concept of making capital available to these countries for investments in solar applications. What we realized was that there are a large number of institutions in the world, financial institutions, funds, banks in the world, which are ready to lend for solar energy. So access to capital becomes the issue rather than the availability of capital itself. But that's not all. The other thing that we understood was that one of the key issues in all countries, but especially so in the least developed countries and the small island developing states, is the cost of capital. If you look at solar electricity, approximately 95% of the cost of solar electricity is due to the cost of the solar panels, and in the future of the solar panels and battery systems together. On the other hand, if you look at fossil fuel-based electricity, less than 50% of its cost is based on capital costs. The balance 50% is based on the cost of acquiring the coal or the gas or other fossil fuels used to run that plant. In other words, while solar electricity is cheaper, solar electricity today, when the sun is shining, only when the sun is shining, costs 1.99 rupees per kilowatt hour, as opposed to coal-based electricity, which costs 3.5 rupees per kilowatt hour. However, much of that cost is front-loaded and captured in the capital cost, the cost of the equipment itself. This means that it is amazingly sensitive to the interest rate at which that capital has been borrowed. If the interest rate is high, so is the electricity price. If the interest rate is low, so is the cost of electricity. In fact, if you look today and look at the cost of electricity from various solar plants in India and across the world, the defining factor in their difference, at least in countries where the financing is occurring, is the cost of capital. Those which are able to de-risk the projects, as has happened to a number of projects in India, in fact, that's one of the major learnings that is occurring from the Indian experience. As you de-risk the projects, the interest rate falls. In parts of the world, the interest rate is very near zero. That is where solar-based electricity is the cheapest. Consequently, for the Solar Alliance, one of the major challenges was, how do we de-risk projects? How do we enable that, the capital to be available and to be available at a lower rate? This led us to look into the structure of financing of solar projects. And we saw that particularly in countries where solar is still in the early stages of development, you could think of financing in terms of three concentric circles. The first and innermost circle is the actual money that it takes to set up a solar plant. This could be provided by a fund, by a bank, by an investment agency. And the person invests because the person or the organization believes that over a period of time, 10 years, 15 years, 25 years, whatever it is, they will get a return commensurate with the investment that they made. So if they invested 100 rupees, then over a 25-year period, they would get 175 or 200 rupees or whatever it is. But this is not always so. As I said, there are a number of risk factors. Investors wonder whether the electricity produced would actually be sold. They wonder whether the electricity that is sold will be paid for. They wonder if the payments would be adequate to meet the kinds of returns they're expecting on their investments. For all of these kinds of reasons, therefore, the second concentric ring is that of risk mitigation financing. The risk mitigation financing is the financing that makes it comfortable, makes it confident, both for the user country and for the investors to see that the investment occurs and that the returns accrue. So this is the second ring. But nobody is going through all of this effort of putting in money into a transaction, of putting the risk mitigation around it for just one project. In other words, we need to make sure that there's going to be a second project, a fifth project, 100th project, and so on. So the third element of financing is the readiness infrastructure. Do we have people who can prepare the projects? Do we have a banking system that can do the risk assessments? Do we have a policy system that can tweak the policy so that it becomes more amenable to accepting renewable energy and managing the grid so that you and I as consumers get reliable electricity? The unfortunate part is that these three kinds of financing, the transaction financing, the risk mitigation financing, and the readiness financing, occurs from different kinds of financiers. As an illustration, the transaction finance is mainly done by banks and investment funds. The risk mitigation finance is done by bilaterals and multilaterals. And the readiness money is largely provided by philanthropic organizations. Now, there is obviously, the bilaterals could also invest in projects, multilaterals could also provide the readiness financing. So there is a certain amount of overlap, but by far and large, these are the three constituencies for financing. Now, when countries are beginning their journey, all these three are needed for the first projects. And what we saw was that this is not happening. Consequently, the Solar Alliance is in the process of building up a blended finance facility, a facility of $700 million to provide, number one, the risk mitigation. It could also be used to provide the concessional loans that are used for viability gap funding, providing the risk capital, and providing non-fund-based support. Together, these would enable the first projects to take off. The good thing about risk mitigation finance is that if it works, it's never used. If it's not successful, it will be used. So a lot of help and support is needed together with the funding. And that's why the readiness becomes important, because national capabilities to manage these projects is important. As we move ahead, it is important that this, as Ambassador Manjeet Puri mentioned, needs to be a collaborative exercise. The International Solar Alliance itself is a collaborative exercise. But as we look at lowering the cost of capital, as we look at demonstrating that the financial viability of business models, as we look at the creation of human and institutional capacity to develop and manage these projects, all of these imply that we would need to have a blended finance facility to meet these. And the blended finance facility brings together the different kinds of financiers who are there for this. We look at this as the first step of a World Solar Bank. Because if this works, it tells us what the needs are. It helps build the confidence as well as the credibility of the actions that will occur in the future. At this time, an international agency which is in the process, which is in the business of creating these kinds of blended finance facilities, is conducting a feasibility and landscape assessment across markets, starting with Africa, and then we'll follow it up with Asia and then with Latin America, across these markets to see what they need. narrowing down and identifying the segments which the envisaged facility will cater to, and then designing the facility and its offerings. Friends, we are at a historic moment. We are at a moment where the costs of electricity from renewable energy are already lower than those from fossil fuels, albeit only when the sun is shining and the wind is blowing. In the evenings, now, you have the peak electricity demand, but unfortunately, there's no sun. And at this point of time, clearly, fossil fuel-based electricity is the cheapest form of electricity until storage facilities become cost-effective. In West Bengal, you have the Puralia's pumped storage facilities, which can provide the kind of balancing that is needed between the variable renewable energy sources, sun and wind on the one hand, and a stable electricity supply to the consumers on the other hand. We will also be looking forward to the price dynamics of batteries. In the past 3 years, between 2017 and 2020, the price of batteries fell by 50% from about $300 per megawatt hour to about $150 per megawatt hour. When it reaches $100 per megawatt hour, and we expect that to occur in the years 2022, 2023, 2024, 2025, the cost of electricity from renewables at any time of the day, round-the-clock electricity as it's called, would be competitive with that from fossil fuels. In other words, we are at the cusp of a point where economically, renewables and storage could become the energy sources of choice. We look forward to enabling the transition across the world. I thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Dr. Mathur. As usual, you brought in the table very contextual issues and mainly dealt on the investment part. Definitely today goes without saying that it is established the cost is less. But what about the investment? And you have mentioned about the transitional investment, risk mitigation investment, and the readiness investment. So these components of investments have to have a return, a reasonable return at all point of time, and the investment has to have a security also. So these are the areas where we need to work on. Thank you again for bringing a very, very contextual and very, very relevant subject on the table. We have with us Mr. Saurabh Kumar, Executive Vice Chairperson, Energy Efficiency Services Limited, who have otherwise also involved with the chamber, as President has said in his welcome address, that he has been with us for bringing some efficiency measures on the energy efficiency aspect for the chamber. So I would request Mr. Saurabh Kumar.
Thank you, Mr. Ray. Mr. Mukherjee, I'd like to first thank the Bengal Chamber for giving me this opportunity. Excellencies, Dr. Ajay Mathur, Dr. Sunita Narayan. I'll be very brief, and I'll first mention what we have been doing in EESL. This was a government startup, and about 6-7 years ago, we were doing small little energy efficiency projects. Our turnover was about $1 million per year. As we speak today, we have invested about $2 billion in energy efficiency and clean energy projects. Our turnover is about $400 million. Our actions have helped the country reduce emissions by about 50 million tons every single year, avoided coal capacity of more than 12,000 megawatt that were not needed because of our actions. And therefore, this has all happened without any subsidy, no grant from either the government of India or any multilateral or bilateral. And this is what my first point I wanted to make. Her Excellency, the Deputy High Commissioner of UK is here. We have the Consul General of the USA, COP21 is being chaired by UK. If you look at any assessment over the last decade or decade and a half by the International Energy Agency, whether it is the 450 ppm scenario or the World Energy Outlook, and you look at the mitigation options, that report says 55 to 60% of the mitigation options lie in low-hanging fruits like energy efficiency. So my appeal to the two excellencies here is that with your leadership in COP, we still don't have an international effort towards energy efficiency. Our actions have shown that this is a proper business that can be enabled. There is enough private capital available. While there are other aspects of the climate change negotiations, and I know Dr. Sunita Narayan, Mr. Puri, and Dr. Mathur, who have been part of the negotiation from the India side, there are politically challenged issues of finance, technology transfer. I'm saying while that go ahead the way it goes ahead, can the world in this critical juncture look at energy efficiency as something which is high on the agenda? 6 years ago, when in COP21, we had the birth of the International Solar Alliance. I'm not suggesting that we create a treaty-based organization or anything like that, but something which becomes high on the agenda. It skirts the political issue. It is a bankable program. It is something that pays for itself. It invites public sector participation or a private sector participation. If we were to do that, what is it that we need to do? And we being the largest energy services company in the world, and there have been several attempts. I mean, the World Bank, for example, used our example in about 8 or 9 countries. None of them have been able to scale the way we have been able to scale. For example, simple things like replacement of light bulbs with LED bulbs. We have done 367 million in this country. That itself is saving about 40 million tons of CO2 every single year. So what can we do? And again, I'll pick up from what Dr. Mathur mentioned, 2-3 things. Readiness. What is needed is project development. How do we create these projects? Because each sector for energy efficiency has a different set of barriers. Someone needs to create instrument that overcome those barriers. What is the second thing that is needed? Second thing is a robust, again, something that Dr. Mathur mentioned, risk mitigation of repayments. If we are able to do these two things, the billions of dollars that is being talked about under the Green Climate Fund may actually come through the private investors into this economy, into economies like India, which will have the same impact that we are trying to do by getting grant money, etc., etc. In fact, I and Dr. Mathur are great adversaries of grant money being used for energy efficiency, because that then only reduces the market size. It doesn't allow scale to happen. Number 2, I would like to also mention one more intervention that we have been doing. That is something which is extremely important as we feel, while a lot of emphasis has been on utility scale solar. But look at countries like India, I mean, while we have connected almost 28 million households in the rural areas, but if you ever go to a rural area and see the quality of supply, it is really, really bad. Number 2, there is almost 70 gigawatt of electricity demand that is used for agriculture, which uses fossil fuel. And because in this country, the price of agriculture power is zero, there is a lot of wastage of power and also groundwater which gets wasted. What we are doing, and I quickly leave this, what we are doing in the state of Maharashtra in rural areas, we are putting small ground-mounted solar power plants right at the edge of the village. And we are supplying power to agriculture at a rate that is 1/3 of the rate that a fossil fuel power is able to come. We are also putting in a very innovative concept, and if you see the logo on top of my head, we call this subject convergence. So what we are doing, and we are going to implement the first set of projects in Meghalaya, which is in the northeast of the country, is that we are putting up batteries in these decentralized solar plants. We are upgrading the public lighting infrastructure in the villages, and we are providing induction cook stoves and LED bulbs to the village households. All that is amortized in the power purchase agreement itself. And therefore, I am able to provide sustainable green energy to the villages, to the households, making them efficient, and also making sure that we take care of their public lighting needs. So again, coming back to my point, such decentralized, disaggregated clean energy projects can help the world, particularly those parts of Asia and Africa and many other parts of the world where a lot of fossil fuel based on energy otherwise will be used to light up the rural areas. This is a model that is something that can be exported around the world. Again, you don't need billions of dollars of the grant money to get this off the ground. Yes, of course, you need, as Dr. Mathur mentioned, readiness finance and risk mitigation finance. So, in conclusion, let me first once again thank Bengal Chambers for inviting me, and I would once again urge the two excellencies sitting here to consider this proposal of at least having some bit of more attention on energy efficiency and decentralized clean energy, which is absolutely be kind of a backbone on which, according to me, the sustainability agenda, whether it is 1.5 degrees or whatever it is, will actually be met, because this is where the balance between development and climate change is there. And also, you don't need in this model of particularly decentralized generation with storage, we don't need to wait till 2023 and 2025 for the battery cost to fall down. You can do it right now. So thank you very much for this opportunity, and I look forward to this. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kumar. You have mentioned about various aspects of the efficiency and particularly the quality of supply. Quality of supply is also very much linked with what we are aiming for. Now, we all are privileged and honored, and we have been given this honor to facilitate Dr. Sunita Narayan for her years of contribution to advocacy of sustainable development. Dr. Sunita Narayan has been with the Center for Science and Environment since 1982. She is currently the Director General of the Center and editor of the fortnightly magazine Down to Earth. She is a writer and environmentalist who uses knowledge for change. Way back in 2005, she was awarded the Padma Shri by the Indian government. She has also received the World Water Prize for work on rainwater harvesting for its policy influence in building paradigm of community-based water management. She advocated solutions to build a coexistence agenda with local communities so that benefits of conservation could be shared and the future secured. Dr. Sunita Narayan was a member of Prime Minister's Council for Climate Change as well as the National Ganga River Basin Authority. I can go on, but the most importantly, what I mentioned, he dedicated his entire life, career for this great cause. I would request the Secretariat to play a video, and then I would request our Honorable President of the Chamber to facilitate Dr. Narayan.
Sunita Narayan has been with the Center for Science and Environment since 1982. She is currently the Director General of the Center and the Treasurer of the Society for Environmental Communications and editor of the fortnightly magazine Down to Earth. She is a writer and environmentalist who uses knowledge for change. In 2005, she was awarded the Padma Shri by the Indian government. She has also received the World Water Prize for work on rainwater harvesting and for its policy influence in building paradigms of community-based water management. In 2005, she also chaired the Tiger Task Force at the direction of the Honorable Prime Minister to evolve an action plan for conservation in the country after the loss of tigers in Sariska. She advocated solutions to build a coexistence agenda with local communities so that the benefits of conservation could be shared and future secured. Dr. Narayan was a member of the Prime Minister's Council for Climate Change as well as the National Ganga River Basin Authority. Dr. Narayan began work on climate change in the early 1990s. In 1991, she co-authored Global Warming in an Unequal World, a case of environmental colonialism, which played a critical role in establishing the principle of equity in the Framework Convention of Climate Change. Dr. Narayan, working with her colleagues at CSE, has been actively engaged in advocating for air pollution control. She believes that the answers to the growing problems of pollution will be in reinventing the growth model of the Western world so that we can leapfrog technology choices and find new ways. Water is clearly most important asset for the country. For Dr. Narayan, it is an issue of great passion as she devotes time to research and advocate for the need to change the paradigm of water management in the country.
It's my singular honor to felicitate Dr. Sunita Narayan for her huge contribution in the realm of sustainability.
Thank you.
We are deeply honored, Madam, to felicitate you, to recognize your contribution, and with your permission, may I be allowed to read the citation. To Dr. Sunita Narayan, Director General, Center for Science and Environment, and Director, Society for Environmental Communications, and publisher, Down to Earth. On this, the 26th day of the month of August in the year of 2021, on the occasion of the 14th edition of the Bengal Chamber's annual Environment and Energy Conclave, the Bengal Chamber of Commerce and Industry is honored to felicitate you for your inspiring leadership in sustainable development and green agenda in the global arena. Your immense contributions in the fields of environment management, natural resources, and creating public consciousness about the need for sustainable development are indeed unparalleled. Your leadership in publications in the realm of environment has paved the path for thought leadership. The Bengal Chamber is privileged to have a long association with you and look forward to taking this association forward. With our deepest regards.
Thank you.
I wish you were here in person, but there's always the hope. We always nurture the hope of seeing you in person sometime in the near future.
Absolutely.
We will send, Angana, are we sending the... we'll send the plaque to you. And may I request you, Dr. Narayan, to share your thoughts and address all of us, please. Over to you.
Thank you. Firstly, Deb and Gautam, thank you so much. I mean, it's such I'm deeply touched by this honor, and thank you so much. I'm also sorry that I'm not with you in Kolkata. Every time I come, I find your hospitality, the warmth, and the willingness to work together. I mean, I am somebody, as you know, is somebody who's always kicking and shoving and pushing. And I'm always amazed how much we have found that we can actually have a conversation together. We may not agree with everything, but we are on the same side. And our deep commitment to sustainability means that we will find the answers together. So thank you so much for this honor. Thank you so much for inviting me. And I definitely hope to see you next time in Kolkata. You know, coming at the end of a very stimulating and fascinating inaugural session where you've had very interesting viewpoints from Melinda, from Sophie, from Saurabh telling us about how his organization is really focusing on decentralized energy, working towards, you know, as I see it, the energy access issue is even more important than the energy transition issue. And that combined together gives us the big solution where you can actually find a solution for the poor in the world. And you can do that with clean energy sources. I mean, there is no other best win that we could have. So what Saurabh told us was fascinating. Ajay, of course, and his work at the Solar Alliance and really finding those solutions so that we can move ahead at scale and pace that is needed. And what I heard from him today was fascinating. And of course, Manjeev and I go back a long way, and we've had fascinating conversations over the years. So I'm really glad to have heard him again today. And thank you for Melinda for telling us about the fascinating work, particularly that the US is doing in Kolkata. I think that was really interesting for me to learn. And of course, Sophie, for the UK's leadership as we go ahead to COP26. It's not a great time in the world to talk about climate change, and yet it's the time when we must talk about climate change. It is very clear that COVID has disrupted our lives, and it is also very clear that COVID is so much a result of our dystopian relationship with nature. And so it tells us of the need for making a change in the way we work with nature, we live with nature. And that's really where climate change and our understanding of climate change and what we need to do must be really rooted. Because in some senses, what COVID has brought out is the sharpness of the interdependent world. The fact is, when as a climate activist, and Manjeev reminded me how old I am and how I was in Rio in 1992, and we pushed for the issue of climate justice and equity there. But still, the very idea of the planetary boundaries, that we live in this one earth, was something that was not so clear. It was something in which countries' self-interest has continued to dominate, in spite of the fact that we must collaborate, because if we do not collaborate, we cannot have either an ambitious agreement or an effective agreement. We know that. Justice and climate justice and equity is at the core of the world finding a way to collaborate. Because if the rich polluted in the past, the poor will pollute in the future. And so the only way that we can actually find a way to be able to do this agreement together, which is effective and ambitious, is to collaborate. And it has to be based on the principles of justice and equity. So these are words. But what COVID has brought to us is the reality of those words. Today, it is very clear that if we do not vaccinate all, nobody will be safe. We are in a deadly race between the virus, the variant, and the vaccine. And that sharpness of our ability to be able to live together, to be able to collaborate together, for us to be safe together, is something that we in Delhi, for instance, have also understood when it comes to air pollution. I mean, air pollution, unlike water pollution is an issue on which the rich of India can cop out and actually start using bottled water. But you can't do that with air. You can have all the air purifiers you want, you can filter the house air that you have, but you will still have to breathe. And the fact is, if there is an inequity in energy access, and the poor women of India still continue to use biomass fuels for cooking, or industry in India continues to use dirty coal or pet coke to drive its industrialization, we will have air pollution. And it will affect the rich and it will affect the poor. So our ability to build an inclusive and affordable future is at the core of a sustainable future. We know that in India. And that's quite different from the rest of the world, because the rest of the world has been able to divorce the issues of equity from the issues of environment. Whereas in India, because affordable growth is at the core of anything that we do with sustainability, for us, the issue of equity is the core of even what we do with national environmental challenges. So we know that. Now comes the big existential threat of climate change. I mean, it's all been said. I don't need to repeat it. I think Gautam started with it. They reiterated it. Every one of the speakers have spoken with passion, commitment, and clarity. The fact is, we have run out of space, we have run out of the carbon budget, and we need to act now. The IPCC report this time has no maybes anymore. It has no ifs and buts. It's absolutely clear. You know, I keep saying the world of buttoned up scientists or suited, booted scientists, it's very difficult for them to ever be so certain about anything. I mean, I've grown up with fighting with scientists who have always had many, many uncertainties attached to every statement. And every politician has been able to say, oh, but there's not enough clarity yet. We still need more. This time, the IPCC report, every second sentence says certainty, complete certainty. We know that humans are responsible for the stock and the current emissions that are causing greenhouse global warming. We know that the impact of this is already being felt in the world. We can even attribute the impact to single events in the world. So we can tell you how much of the flooding in Germany is caused by climate change. So there is clarity now. But I have to say, and that is something where I am, and I think Dev and Gautam will forgive me for this, but they know me well enough. I am not so sanguine as my rest of my speakers on what we have done till now and what we are doing currently. I think we need to put our foot on the gas and step on it much faster. When I was in Rio, it was very clear the Rio conference agreed on a very important principle. It said the world has to collaborate. For it, there are certain countries, and at that time, 75% of the emissions were from six countries and the EU. And these countries had to reduce, but they needed to provide space for other countries to grow. But the other countries would grow differently because they would get money and technology so that they didn't need to make the mistakes of the already rich countries in the world. That was in 1992. The only change that has happened between 1992 and say today, 2021, is that there is one more country which has joined the ranks of the original 7, which is China. So today, between China and the original 7, over 70% of the stock of emissions of the past are contributed by this group of countries. Now, I'm stating this point just to make the point that climate change is about that agreement in which countries would reduce and others would get the space to grow. And that did not happen. But today, when we sit in 2021 and we look at COP26 and we look at the future, let's be very clear that we have run out of carbon space and the carbon budget. Manjeev, it is not 500 gigatons, but 400 gigatons, which is currently left between now and in the carbon budget if the world wants to stay within 1.5 degree centigrade rise. So just 400 gigawatts. And if you add up the emissions currently, then you know that 400 gigawatts, even if you take the very, very ambitious, and I think for once, Melinda, I would say the US is really walking the talk. President Biden's 50% reduction by 2030 is undoubtedly very welcome. But even if I take if I take the US plan into action, I take the EU, the UK NDC, which is also ambitious, we still are going to run out of the entire carbon budget, remaining carbon budget, in the next 10 years. So we have to remember this, that we are standing at a precipice which requires us to act much faster. And we are not doing that currently. So there is an issue about the question about how countries will reduce, how much they will reduce, and how fast they will reduce. Now, this is where I want to have make it clear that net zero is only aspirational as of today. It has no flesh, it has no bones. It has no way that we can say that any country is going to be net zero in 2050. Let's also be very, very clear that the net zero plans of most countries are waiting for disruptive technologies to kick in. And that is something that we cannot afford to do. So we have to talk about action today. And to talk about action today, I think what we need to do is to focus on 2030, not net zero. We do not need to talk about net zero because also it believes too much on the role of the absorptive capacity of the sinks. And we know today the amount of uncertainty there is in calculating that. We also know that science is telling us that as temperatures increase, the capacity of sinks to absorb carbon dioxide will even go down. So given all that, it is very clear that we need to focus on 2030, not on net zero. Now, if I say all that, I must also spend a few minutes to say that this does not mean that India is off the hook. The Indian government very clearly is doing what you would call actions which are comparable to its emissions and the stock of emissions in the atmosphere, which is why India has not taken on an absolute emission reduction target. We have taken on an emission intensity reduction target. Okay, and we are on track as far as that is concerned. But as an Indian environmentalist, I would expect more from my government. I would expect more because it is in my self-interest. It's not about climate change. It's about the co-benefits that we will get of being able to not just walk the talk, but run the talk. and move ahead with greater speed. So instead of us looking at climate change as an issue where we are comparing ourselves to the rest of the world, we need to look at climate change and action that we need to take as what is in our best interest. And this is where, Gautam, I must say, and you're part of that industry, I have to say, CSC and our work on thermal power, we are absolutely unhappy with what is happening currently. After 2015, we got emission standards, we pushed, we got the standards, progressive industries moved to set up FGDs, to reduce their emissions, and then because of the pressure, and of course, every country wants growth today, post-COVID. Every country is looking at browning the growth rather than greening the growth. We're going backwards. We know that, you know that. We've got new notification which says that you can continue to pollute as long as you pay a penalty. This is not acceptable. We also know that in our part of the world, e-vehicles are very important, but e-vehicles are not important as individual vehicles. We are going to have to make transformational changes, and that will come out of moving towards mobility transformation. So we cannot anymore talk about cars. We have to talk about buses, trams, walk, cycle. That's the model that our cities can do. Because in our cities today, there is such gross inequity in how many people drive and how many people take a bus. And so we have an opportunity to reinvent. So we can and must do more. And I think that's my final word right now. And I know we've run out of time. I want to say that this is where the Bengal Chamber needs to work with us more, needs to be much more aggressive in pushing those transformational changes. I know you, Deb, I know you, Gautam. You're not the type who just talk big and do little. You're the type who walk the talk. And so please help us to take this leadership to really talk about what's that transformational change that we can make in our world. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Sunita Narayan. Very relevant, very emotional, very passionate. Definitely you have spoken about the energy access is more important or equally important, like energy transition, what we are speaking of. I was just writing, is it because of COVID where we are now, or is it because of us where COVID is now? Climate justice and equity, who is the contributor? You have specifically mentioned. We have heard about digital divide. We know how the divide is. So net zero, in your view, requires disruptive technology, and it is not only the policy framework or something ambitious plan, it also requires the enablers. The enablers are also important to design to achieve the target. Offline, I will talk about my company, but only thing I can tell you, the first initiatives of e-vehicle in the city of Calcutta, one of the first initiatives, including setting up the charging stations, were set by CSC. And the pollution figures what we operate in our thermal power plants are way above the normatives. We have been awarded almost all certificates on the pollution and accolades. I will share with you in offline. We have a great commitment as an organization. We are well ahead with the FGD program. So definitely we are committed on this aspect. It was a very, very thought-provoking, participating, emotional, and very contextual deliberation. We are running late. Ongona is continuously chasing me to finish the session as quickly as possible. Thank you all again. Thanks all the speakers who have contributed greatly. And I hope the next 2 days there will be lot many values which will be added, and we will be able to plan a journey towards not only bringing sustainability, climate justice, as well as we will prepare ourselves for the COP26.